Hey, maybe you usually feel super energized by your work, but lately you feel kind of drained. Well, I think that happens when every single to-do item on your list feels like it's sitting at the very top of your list. Everything seems urgent. I'm Pamela Wilson, and I coach people to build profitable businesses. Subscribe to my channel so you can build your revenue. I believe that the business world favors those who take super bold action, but you can't be bold if you're feeling unsure about what you should be working on first. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about this today. I wanted to share my hard-earned lessons so that you can get more done and feel in control of your own schedule. But before we dive in, I want to let you know about Revenue Revolution, my free guide to generating large-scale revenue with a small-scale audience. You can find it at pamelawilson.com/revenue. All right, are you ready? Let's conquer your to-do list once and for all. I have some advice that's based on my years in the business trenches. I'm kind of a professional juggler. There has not been a time in my business when I haven't been juggling forces that were all kind of competing for my attention. And by the way, I do not look nearly as put together as this woman does when I juggle. She's got her hair done. She's wearing a stylish outfit. She even has accessories on. Not me. When I'm juggling, I do not look nearly as put together. I also am not coordinated enough to juggle a 10-pound dumbbell. So this is just an illustration, but it's an illustration of the fact that I started my business when I was pregnant, and I ran it for the first few years with kind of babies at my feet, right? So some people might be able to relate to that. Eventually, my children went off to school, and then I was juggling running my business with parenting school children, which any of you listening who have done that know that parenting a child who's in school is kind of like a part-time job. Just keeping up with all of their activities and keeping them on track with their homework. It's a lot of work. I was also a single mom for some years, so I was juggling my business while being a single mom. And then I juggled running my offline business with running my online business because I moved into an online business back in 2010. In 2014, I joined the team at Rainmaker Digital, and they quickly moved me to the copy blogger side of the business. So at that point, I was juggling keeping Big Brand System going while I managed the education and the blog over on Copy Blogger. And, because I didn't have enough to do, I also wrote a book while I was doing all that. So you can throw that into the mix. I have learned a few techniques for getting things done, and those are what I'm going to be sharing with you today. And they help you to avoid that paralyzing overwhelm that kind of creeps up when you have way too much to do. So I have been paying attention to an online educator named Taki Moore. It's takimoore.com, TAKIMOORE.com. So Taki Moore talks about lots of things, but one of the things that he talks about is how to look at your goals, different ways to look at your goals as you're working on your business. And he recommends that you look at them from 4 different perspectives. One is the 3-year perspective. One is the 1-year perspective. And then we have the this quarter perspective and the this week perspective. So let's see what that looks like. When you're thinking about your 3-year goals, back in the day, we used to talk about what's your 5-year goal? Well, actually, I think 5 years might be a little bit too much and hard to visualize. So thinking about it in terms of what you want to accomplish with your business in 3 years, who you want to serve and how you want to serve them in 3 years is probably more useful. So what do you want your revenue to be in 3 years? What do you want your reach to be? What kinds of things do you want to be doing in your business, in your life? Think this through. This is a moment where you need to kind of think big. 3 years is a fair amount of time. So think about everything you would dream to accomplish in those 3 years, and where you want to be 3 years down the line. Then the next step is to break it down into 1 year. So take those 3-year goals and break them into what can I do this year to get me closer to that 3-year goal. So what groundwork do you need to lay this year so you can get to that 3-year goal? So the concept here is to kind of chunk down that 3-year goal into 1-year parts. So this year you'll do this, and then you'll build on it in year 2. And then at the end of year 3, you'll be at this place. That's the idea. Then you take your 1-year goal and you chunk it into 4 quarters. So you want to look at your goal for this particular quarter and think about what needs to happen this quarter to get to the 1-year goal. So take the 1 year, chunk it into 4 quarters, and then see what you can do step by step to get you to that 1-year goal by working on these things quarter by quarter. And then you take your quarterly goal and you chunk it down to week by week. So you map out 12 weeks in a quarter. What do I need to do every week so that at the end of the quarter, my quarterly goal is fulfilled? Now, the beauty of this system, the beauty of this way of looking at your goals is that basically you're chunking things down so they're more manageable, right? You're not looking at your 3-year goal and feeling completely overwhelmed. You're just looking at what you need to work on this week. And as long as you stay focused on that, on what is directly in front of your line of vision, you will get to your big goals. The next thing I want to talk about is what you can do to get your biggest projects done. This happens to me on a regular basis. I start thinking about my projects and all the little tasks that have to get done so that my projects can be completed. And even when I'm only looking at a week at a time, I just start feeling overwhelmed, and I start getting that paralysis feeling like, oh, there's, too much and I can't deal with it. And you just want to throw in the towel and walk away, right? So when this happens, when I start feeling that feeling, I have this trick that I've used for years. And the idea is that you write down everything that's floating around in your head and taking up space and making you feel overwhelmed and paralyzed. Now, it might be helpful to do this in a format where you can move the list items around. So if you are a tangible thinker, you might put them onto index cards or put them onto sticky notes. If you like to think with a computer, you could use a mind map or even just a text document. You don't have to use anything fancy, but the example I'm showing you on the slide is, let's say that you want to offer coaching. Now, coaching is a very simple online offer because honestly, coaching doesn't have that many moving parts. But even so, this list is really daunting. So what I want to ask you to do is to take this brain dump list that you have gotten out of your head and to prioritize it into 3 big groups. Phase 1 is the must-have group. Phase 2 is the nice-to-have group, if time allows. And then phase 3 is a list for all the things that you can do later. So let's look at all of those. We'll start with phase 1. So of that big brain dump list that I just showed you, I pulled out 3 things that if I'm going to offer online coaching, I have to have these things in place. So first of all, you have to write some kind of description of what you'll offer when you offer coaching, because you have to be able to describe it to people if you're going to ask them to buy it from you. Then you have to have some kind of product to buy. So if you use shopping cart software, that means setting up the product on your shopping cart software. If you are a minimalist or you're just getting started, that might just mean having a PayPal link that you can send to people. It doesn't have to be complex. And then the other must-have is you have to have a plan for how you're going to let prospects know that you have coaching available. So you have an email list, or you're participating in groups, or whatever you use to communicate to prospects. However you're connected to people online, maybe you're very active on a social media platform, so you use that to let people know. But these are minimal things that if you're offering coaching, you have to have these 3 things in place. And most projects are like that. There are minimal things that have to be done so that you can launch them. And if you're really honest with yourself, a lot of things fall into these next categories. So the next category is phase two. Phase two is for items that are nice to have. They would make your offer better if you have time to add them. So for example, let's go back to this example of our coaching client. A nice to have item would be some kind of scheduling software. So the person who's going to coach with you can automatically schedule. They get access to your calendar to see what times you have available. They can match your times up with their times, and they can schedule a coaching call with you. You don't absolutely have to have that. If you're offering coaching, you could also just email back and forth with the person until you find a time that you're both available. But it is a nice to have for sure. It makes it a lot easier. And most projects have something like that. It's not an absolute necessity, but it would make the offer better and easier. It'd make it run smoother. The other thing that's a nice to have for coaching calls would be a way to record them, because then that adds value to the coaching. You can say, I will give you a recording of our call. So having some kind of software in place that you can record those calls, that's a plus as well. The other thing is a way to share coaching notes. So you could have a shared Google document, for example. That's what I use. Not a necessity, but definitely a nice to have. So, when you're looking at your projects, again, I want you to be very honest about what is an absolute necessity and what would just be a nice to have item if I have time to do it. And then finally, there's this whole category of tasks that honestly can be done later. So if you look at your list, there are things that would be great. They're great ideas, but you can totally do them later. You can launch without them. So for example, we have our coaching offer, right? So it would be great to have a location to keep all the coaching recordings. So maybe you have a protected location on your website, or maybe you even just have a shared Dropbox folder, but some kind of location to keep all your coaching recordings. That's a nice thing to have, but you can totally launch without that. You could also develop some kind of bonus content library for your coaching clients. So maybe there are specific questions that come up with just about every client. So you develop some worksheets or some checklists that can help them to answer those questions. You put them into a content library. Again, not necessary in order to launch, but it would be a nice thing you could add later, once you get it going. And a group coaching component. I did coaching for 6 years before I added the mastermind component. So it was not necessary in order to launch. And most projects have tasks that fall in that category. They're good ideas, but they are not absolutely essential in order to get that idea out into the world. So again, focus on the essentials, do the brain dump. And then focus only on tackling the things that absolutely have to happen in order to launch your new project. And then move on to the next phase if you have time. So cross the initial things off your list and move on to the if you have time items. Don't let an overwhelming task list stop you from getting your projects out into the world. Just categorize them under phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then they'll be a lot more manageable. Last thing, I want to share this 5-minute a week productivity habit that I have been using now for years. It's short. It doesn't take long at all, and it makes a big, big difference. And it's basically this concept, you've heard it before probably, of a weekly review. So I like to think of this as a coffee break for your business. It's a way to just stop and think about what you've done. So weekly review, you basically just have to ask yourself 2 questions. First of all, how did your week go? So this is where you look back and you say, what went well? Not all weeks are as productive as others, right? So look at what went well, congratulate yourself on what went well. I'm a big believer in, gold stars. I actually have a box with gold star stickers. So I'll put gold stars on things when I finish them. I'm a very visual person. So that's very motivating to me. You might create bar charts. You might grade yourself on how you're doing, like a 0 to 100 scale. Whatever you can do where you can basically observe something, make a note, and then measure it, you can improve it. right? So the idea behind this weekly review is to just take 5 minutes. Don't just push away from your desk at the end of the week, but take 5 minutes to look back and honestly think about how your week went. And then the other piece of that is to look ahead to the week that's coming up and just think about what's on tap. What are my big priorities for the next week? This should not take you more than about 5 minutes. And you can have coffee and a croissant if that makes it easier as well. But make this something that you build into your week so that you can stay on track and make sure that you're everything you're doing on a weekly basis is taking you closer to your goals. So I want to quickly review the 3 main topics we covered today. So the first one is this idea that you take your big goal and you break it down and you break it down and you break it down until all you're focusing on is what needs to happen this week. It's the number one way to get rid of overwhelm, is to just break down those goals so that you know for sure that you're working on something that's manageable, but that will also take you closer to the goal you're trying to reach. The second item is this way of dealing with large projects. So I recommend that you do a massive brain dump, get the entire list of tasks out of your head so it's not taking up all your brain space. And then you phase 1, 2, 3 it. So you divide things into what absolutely must be in place in order to launch. And then you make a second list, a phase 2 list of things that would be nice to have, but aren't absolutely necessary. And then finally, you keep a list of this can happen later. It's a great idea, but it can totally happen later. And that would be your phase 3. Then finally, I recommend that you build in some kind of coffee break for your business. You take a few minutes every week to just look over what went well and give yourself some kind of a grade if that's a motivator for you. And then look ahead to the week that you have coming up and think about what you would like to definitely tackle. When you hit a certain point in your career, you might suffer from an embarrassment of riches. You are so good at so many different things that you might have more ideas than you can even manage. So how can you decide which ideas to pursue? Well, if you're focused on building profits, I want you to ask yourself, which of these ideas will bring in revenue the fastest? And if you were my coaching client, I would tell you to put all the other ideas up on a shelf, well protected, but in a place where they're not going to get lost and they're not going to take you away from focusing solely on getting that one profitable idea built and out into the world. I have one more piece of advice for you. Once you've chosen that offer that you want to build, there's one more step you really have to take. Do not pour a ton of time and energy and money into building this full-fledged, fully finished offer before you've even tested it. You need to make sure that it's exactly what your audience really wants and needs before you build it all the way out. And to do that, I want you to watch this video so you can go from offer idea to selling your offer in as little as 30 days.